Hey there, my name is John Lim, and welcome to our Alumni Honoring Week interviews, where we sit down and chat with one of our 700 Net Canada alumni, share a few laughs, and hear their story. Today, I have with me Brad Sanesh. Brad, welcome to the show.
Very glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, so Brad, tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of a before, during, and after Net overview of your life.
Sure, thank you. So I guess my family has had connections to Net way back, including I was a participant, a retreatant on the very first Net Canada team's retreat out in Kamloops, BC, where they had, I think, over 200 retreatants for a confirmation retreat. That was an overnight. So it is, I think it's known as one of the craziest retreats that have ever happened. But I enjoyed it thoroughly and still remember Garth's magic tricks.
Of course, classic Garth.
So that was sort of my first, I guess, experience with Net. But we had Net through host homes, kind of come through the Kamloops area and met a bunch of different teams through the year. In fact, my sister-in-law, Janet Tumbuck, was on 97-98 year. I ended up applying to go on Net for 2001 with my cousin Desmond Sanesh. I was on Net Team 1 of the touring teams. There was only touring teams at that point in time. Net was such an amazing experience for myself, and I think we'll get into some of that later, and some of the stories and kind of some of the highlights of that time. After Net finished, I went back to Kamloops for my first year of university, and that was actually the year of the first parish-based team. So I got an opportunity to be on the core team, assisting with that. So I was only on Net for 1 year, but I don't know, I call it like 1.5 because I was still around that team quite a bit and had the pleasure of working with them. As far as my involvement with Net now, I'm a school principal and have been a teacher and been in central office doing support for religious education and a supervisor of religious education, actually, and living in Calgary here, so part of Calgary Catholic School District, which is the second largest Catholic school district in Canada. Very happy to be serving in the roles that I've had here. And most recently, I'm actually a board member for Net, so I still get to be connected in that way, and just really am honored to be able to serve the ministry that I love so dearly in that way now.
Well, thank you so much for all of your work and for everything that you do for Net. So can you kind of speak a little bit about how about your Net year a little bit, and then how that kind of fits into the bigger picture of your life right now? Sure.
So I think Net's mission and mandate, as far as helping young people encounter Christ in a meaningful way. There's going to be lots of stories about that. One thing that I wanted to kind of look at was really the experience that the Netters have too. And it is an amazing experience. Like when you think about it, some of my experiences, I guess, that it would fall into that would be showing up at Net training and they keep going through these talks and it's really good and you're learning a lot of stuff. You're like, I thought we were going to learn like how to play games and do skits. Like what week does that come in, right? And but just that model of really trying to develop the individual and to really grow that faith so that you have something to give. That's lifelong learning stuff, and that has such an impactful, such an impact on people for their whole lives. So obviously, training was an amazing experience for me. We had a very strong team. Really took pride in our retreat ministry, was blessed with Cameron Frad, who was Cameron Mater at the time. We had James Leapoth, who was an amazing musician in there. We had Blair Fitzsimons and Kathleen, 2 second years, leading our team, top to bottom. Many good men and women on there, and I was just so happy to be a part of it. So one of the things that I feel like is undervalued is the actual work that you as a netter do on the road. So if you are on a touring team, you are going to go in and there's going to be, call it 100 young people there, that you have basically 4 hours to turn from like this nerdy guy because it's a church thing into creating a relationship where people are comfortable about talking about some of the most intimate things in their lives when it comes to their faith. And you do all that work and you crank it out and the Holy Spirit is working through you and you get to a prayer ministry scenario and it's all coming together. And as a teacher in my profession, you'd be like, okay, so you're building relationships with kids, that's good. But you get the same class the next day, right? Like you haven't lost all that. Whereas on the road with Net, you do all that work and then the next day you start over at ground zero again and do the exact same thing. And some of those skills, the ability to work well with a team, with conflict resolution, and not cringing necessarily every time someone says, "Can I speak to you for a minute?" And working with the relationship building with young people. I have been blessed with a lot of education after Net, but I honestly tell people that those experiences of training, consistent supervision and accountability put in place by your supervisors as well as your teammates, and that actual work of working in a pretty difficult situation day in and day out, those experiences are worth multiple degrees put together, and it's all crammed into 1 year or a couple depending on how you serve. So I think aside from the primary most important part of Net, which is the faith-based things, there's massive learning that goes on and benefits people for whatever careers they choose and their life to come. So I just think it's such an amazing ministry to complement both our young people that we serve as well as those missionaries on the road too.
What would you say was kind of the most valuable lesson that you learned on Net that's kind of carried on into, say, your vocation, your career?
I talk about one retreat in particular. I remember there's a whole part, and I think it's in kind of central Ontario, about a couple weeks there that I literally don't remember. And it was at the end of the road, and I think we were almost catatonic. And there was this retreat, and we were doing before retreat prayer, and I was feeling pretty down, and I was leading the retreat, not down, just exhausted and tired. And we had before retreat prayer, and then all of a sudden the retreatants came in and we were on, and I felt, good energy and it was an amazing retreat, like the amount of fruit from it and the kids and the response. And I'm like, wow, wow, we really cranked it out. We were awesome. That we were good. And then after retreat prayer finishes, and I literally am exhausted instantly. And I actually go down on one knee, and then I just kind of like lean over and lay there, and people are like, "You okay?" I'm like, I just need a moment. I'm just really tired. And it was so evident for me in that time that like we weren't doing anything. It was God. It was, and the fact that, we had thought that and we did, we worked hard to present it in the best way possible. But just so obviously God's work. And I think in life now, no matter what situation you're in, we can get caught up, and we should work hard, and we should use the gifts God has given us. And when we got to put in our part of the work, because everybody's always so quick to dust off the sandals and go on. No, the first missionaries worked really hard though, right? And so we work really hard, but in the end, it is all certainly with God that we have that success.
So you talked a little bit about how right now you're a school principal. So how do you live out your faith now, especially in your workplace?
Yeah, I think I'm blessed in that way. It's maybe a little easier as a Catholic school principal. You can bring your faith into really everything that you do. So that whether it's we talk about a discipline issue or supporting a kid or talking with staff, it can really be entirely framed by our faith. So I think that what Nat probably helped with the most with that was being able to take our faith, which is beautiful and has fullness of truth and is amazing, but making it accessible, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're a teacher, if you're a student. People ask, well, what do Catholic schools look like? What do Catholic teachers look like? I say a lot like the pews, man. So we have all kinds of people, and it's really, the onus is on us, I think, to make sure that we are educating and working hard to put our faith forward in the best way. Like, for example, if you were to think about it from a marketing perspective, like if you had a product, right, and people weren't buying this product, well, there's two possibilities. One is your product, you invented something that's not needed. Okay, so oh no, it's never going to be on late night TV for buying 2 for 1 or whatever, right? Like, so your product stinks, or your marketing sucks, so people don't know why they need your product. Now, in terms of our Christianity, we can't say the product sucks, right? Because it's the good news. If I was there, we would have called it, I don't know, great news, amazing news, Uber news, whatever. It's the best news. So our product, by definition, is great. So the problem is our marketing department. Now, interestingly, we are the ones that were left entirely in charge of the marketing department. So I think that there's some conviction as in any job and in any profession to really make sure that we are taking that message and making it marketable. I know we're going to talk a little bit about evangelization. Maybe we can get into that here. That, NET even having the name National Evangelization Team, back in the day, that evangelization piece was kind of like, oh, like people sometimes that almost raised red flags for people, right? And coming into an understanding where the new evangelization is more accepted, even though it's decades after we were supposed to be doing a lot of this stuff. That evangelization piece is so key, and for me, evangelization is most effective in a relational way. Sure, it's good to know about your faith. Yeah, it's great to know your apologetics. It's all good, right? But the most effective way for evangelization is relationship. Period. There's no better way to do it. So I sometimes say, like, when you're working with people and in any situation, sometimes, like, Saturday night often comes before Sunday morning. And what I mean by that is sometimes it's even, spending time with someone, even going out, having a beer with someone, that relationship developing and some of those conversations prep what you want to get to on Sunday morning. And I think that that's a good thing to remember. Sometimes people are so quick to kind of give up or not put in the time necessary, and it's a slow play, but it's the right play, right? And yeah, you get to Sunday morning, but you certainly want to have it framed in that way.
Yeah, you got to lead them there, right?
I think so.
Now, going back a little bit in the timeline, so right after you finished your year on NET, how did you find like living out your faith was kind of post-NET?
So there's one team member that I haven't talked about yet. Well, there's a few, but one that I really should. In that there was a lady on my team named Kirsty Tumbach. And throughout our year on the road, we developed what would be called an attraction on the road, and our entire team pretty much knew about it, to the point where, like, we were never scheduled to do a game or like anything together. Like it was kind of funny, actually, and we behaved very well on the road. And at the end of NET, when we got to wrap up, we were kind of having those meetings where you're sort of saying goodbye to where the relationship was at that point in time. And I was praying about this meeting coming up and kind of, well, what was this going to look like? And I just really felt convicted to be supportive of whatever she had discerned. And there's one form of discernment that I'm not a fan of, and I call it Bible bingo, but it's almost like taking an 8-ball, shaking it up. And basically what you would do is you would say, like, okay, what am I going to be in life? And you open the Bible and put down your finger, and you're like either a carpenter, a king, or like going to some foreign land, right? Because so these things need to be properly discerned. So I've always said, okay, like, just because it says 9 cubits by 8 cubits by 6 cubits, like, doesn't mean you're supposed to be a carpenter or go buy a house, right? Like, you should be praying and meaningfully discerning this. So approaching that meeting, James Michalosik, who is actually my cousin, had pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Brad, have you met with Kirsty yet?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "You have to wait 6 months after the road." And I said, "First of all, like, that's a suggestion." And he goes, "Well, for you, it's mandatory." And I'm like, this is not part of the deal. So all of this leads up to that meeting. We go into that meeting. I'm like, "How much do you want to talk about?" She says, "Well, I'm tired of not talking about stuff." So we talked a little bit, but through the process, she said, "I was praying and I was discerning, and I opened the Bible and I put my finger down, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what do we?" And I'm like, this is not discernment, right? And so I go through my whole stick about why that's a silly way to live life. And then she goes, "No, it's like," I put my finger down. I'm like, "Okay, well, what happened?" She goes, "So she had opened the Bible and she had put down her finger, and the words above her finger were 6 months." which is unusual because it's not really in the Bible a whole lot. So this particular quote was from when Jesus feeds the 5,000, and it's supposed to say 200 denarii or even half a year's wage. But in this particular translation, it says 6 months wage. So that one didn't need a lot of discernment, we figured. And then actually later in life, I bought her a different translation of the Bible, so that wouldn't happen again. So we waited 6 months before pursuing our relationship. What I think is important about that time is that, and the wisdom behind that is I knew I could be the person that I wanted to be with her, but I needed some time to learn to be the person I wanted to be without her, because it's healthier that way and it's a stronger relationship that way. And so during that time, you're back in kind of your old place. You're meeting up with some new friends, and you're trying to stay the course. And it was a really good time for me to make sure that I was solid with just myself too. I was very much blessed with good fellowship, so a lot of good people to hang out with, and like I said, that first parish team there. And then I did the unthinkable, which was move from British Columbia to Saskatchewan to pursue this young girl who is now my beautiful wife. And we have 3 wonderful children. Well, 2 wonderful children, but 3 of them. And she is a physiotherapist out here. She's currently off because she took an extra year after our last child, and just kind of really benefited from. I think the biggest thing for me after that kind of funny story or an impactful story is just that idea of fellowship and how do you stay connected and what are you doing to make sure that that you have some people around you that are people that you want to be like. I think that's a really big piece for me. And there'll be ups and downs, and you'll feel closer or farther away at different points, but being able to connect to some form of Christian fellowship, I think, is just massive.
Yeah, agreed. Now, so I guess the questions that I kind of want to ask you right now is, after you did your year of net and, traveling everywhere, putting on retreats, you get to evangelize right on the front lines. What did evangelization look like for you after net?
Yeah, I think for me, directly after net, I was still plugged into that core team. Then going to university, I was working with Catholic Christian Outreach, CCO, a little bit on campus, not in mission work with them, but as a student and attached to that movement. But I think the biggest things are kind of going back to that idea of the relational part, right? Like sometimes those ministries, like the real work is like in the broadcasting of of the net, right? So it's it's building those relationships. So regardless of what situation you're in, kind of, making sure that you're choosing joy, so that when people don't necessarily know you're a faithful person right off the top, they're still like, wow, this person is very positive. This person seems to be motivated. This person seems to be, and then eventually you kind of come around after that relationship's been built to oh, well, why does he always goes somewhere Sunday morning? Like, what's up with that? And then you bring people along. So I think, I've often said sometimes people, when they're looking at personal testimonies, personal faith stories to share, sometimes people say, well, I don't have a good one. And I'm like, well, that's a lie. Okay. So sometimes people want these big burning bush moments. Those are sometimes not actually that effective, because most of our life is lived in kind of the normal day to day. And it's really about taking a lens of seeing how God is working in sometimes very mundane things. But that's where a lot of our faith is lived, right? It's in the day to day, in the present. So when people say that, I always say, you know what? Well, how about this? Pray for God to give you a testimony, like to put you in a situation in the next little bit here where you're gonna have a story that you can tell about faith, about journeying with people. And I find He shows up, right? So so in those things, I would say the evangelization that I'm most proud of come from the regular situation with normal people who I wasn't intentionally targeting for evangelization, but I was authentically journeying with. And then when your faith is part of your life and it's an integral part of you, that ends up coming in. And then you do have those big discussions, and you can talk about some of the teachings of the church that people struggle with, right? And those come in a way where they're often received, right? But to be able to do that, to be out there in where the good work needs to be done, I think you need to have a pretty core group of people around you that you're looking to for support, to make sure that you're taking care of yourself spiritually as well.
Now, what lessons from your net years, if any, have you taken with you in life that's really helped you to continue to evangelize, especially in your life right now?
I think it's that charismatic, basic gospel message approach is so great. Sometimes you have people who they believe they don't want to do like a faith study or something like that because, I went to Bible school, I already know it all already. And it's like, okay, well, you know what, maybe you should call Francis and tell him, because he's still working on it, So the faith is so deep and so great that you could meditate on one of the simplest concepts for forever. And it you still want to get to the bottom of it. That's why there's these beautiful mysteries. So I think that that basic gospel message, sometimes we get excited about the really kind of out there stuff of our faith, which is great. And it adds an amazing richness to our faith. But really that ability to effectively communicate the basic gospel message is so key. I regularly use miss the mark when talking about behaviors with junior high kids, right? So what you like, you could go and say, okay, so that was a sin. Okay, you could, but that idea of missing the mark, and there used to be a part in a talk where we'd have the target, right, for an arrow, for a sinus, and I sometimes even go into that, and kids understand that. Like, there's lots of times where we all miss the mark, and that's what it is. So guess what? We didn't live our life in the best way that we were supposed to. That happens. So now what do we do from that?
So you've been, you're a school principal in the Calgary area, and we've had a net team for the Calgary School Board for the last couple of years. How has that kind of interaction been, especially seeing this younger generation come in and work with your students?
Yeah, it's great. We've throughout my years in different schools where I've been at, we've had the net team come in to work with students in a variety of ways, whether it be retreats or other opportunities. And it's great. Every team's different, right? I literally think when they're building those teams that they sit there and they try to pick like the most different individuals to put on a team, which is great because as a kid, you look and you're like, I don't really relate to him, but I relate to her or whatever. And so that's really good from a retreatant perspective. The funny part is then you throw everybody together on a team and tell them to live nicely together. And that's an excellent social experiment, right? Like Net was doing reality TV before it was a thing. So I think that one of the neat things is seeing the different gifts and the charisms, and then you have people whom we have good friends who live in Calgary. Tara Kipe, who Kirsty stayed at her house. She was a host family, and to end up having those spirals come back and becoming good friends. Tara helped take care of one of our children for a while when Kirsty was back at work. That's a neat thing, and just all of so many different connections. My niece, Erin Lindoff at the time was her last name, was so proud to see her, which she has such amazing gifts and to use them in that way and share them in that way. It's an amazing experience, and just so those connections are really neat. The other thing that's funny is how much of it still works, right? So I do an amazing Simon Says. Like I'm telling you, get everybody down. Like it is great, and I can do it with my whole school. There's no chance. Like I got it. And some of that stuff that it still works because humanity, although has the times have changed, humanity hasn't in some ways, and so it's amazing to see that, and then they. Net can do something I can't, right? So like, yes, I can do these things, whatever I can create educational learning experiences we can talk about, but that relational piece for a young person to see another young person instead of some older person that they've heard 1,000 times, and they're saying a similar thing, and they're really putting flesh on our faith. That's something that's irreplaceable. Like you just can't, you can't get that in another way. So that's such a benefit to the ministry and to serving Catholics in Canada and furthering our mission.
Yeah. Now, do you have any notes of encouragement to your fellow alumni, older and younger? If you have any, what would you want to say?
I think I would say that our faith is messy, and that's okay. We had a bishop out here a while back. Bishop Henry used to say, I'm not okay, you're not okay, and that's okay. So there's this idea sometimes, I think, that we always want that high standard, and the church should never lower its standard. It's like wellness in any other area. You have your high standard, but do people always choose the thing that's best for their wellness, best for their fitness, best for their... No. And that is part of the Christian truth, right? Like Christianity necessitates a savior, okay? So you ain't doing it all by yourself. So sometimes I find people can kick themselves a little bit when they're down, or they can feel distance. They can be like, you know what, I really made a mess of this thing now, or I broke this commitment, or I did this and I did that. That is our Christian faith. Our Christian faith is lived in the messy. So if people are sitting there and they're down on themselves, or they feel distant, or they feel that they can't connect, or they feel like they've lost some of that, I just encourage them, like that's not guilt is a good thing, because it reorientates us to God. Shame is not. Shame is a lie, right? And because we are created with this inherent dignity and worth, and there's always a path back. I like to think of the Christian journey as your GPS system in your car, right? Or your Google Maps, right? And you're going along and you type in your destination, and the church tells you this is the quickest, straightest way to get there. But in our own choices and in our own free will, we're driving, we're like, but it doesn't know the shortcut. I know, you'll just go down 17th here. And you turn, and then it adds another 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But the best part of our faith is that map, that GPS system saying recalculating. And instantly there's a new path back. There's a new path to the destination. And that's, I think, a beautiful real life example of how I believe God works with us. He's the same destination. He's been in there. He's not moving, right? But in our path, when we move, that ability to recalculate, to have that path back, and that, that path might have some interesting, some you never thought you'd be here moments. But there is that recalculation. We do believe in that prize. We believe in that destination, right? And it is good news, and it's amazing news. And I think for anyone, regardless of alumni on net, that message that our faith is lived in some messy places, and that's okay. And regardless of where anybody's at, there's the opportunity to recalculate, to reorientate, to turn towards God. And we have this amazing sacraments, both reconciliation and nourishment in the Eucharist, and to take advantage of that for the journey, and to be proud of the journey, regardless of where you're at. Hopefully you're making a few more of those testimonies, of those faith sharing stories, and celebrating those and sharing those, and in your community, and being involved in your local parish, and any other ministries that are aligned with your gifts, and still working it.
Great analogy, great advice. I've definitely feel like I've taken something from that. But Brad, thank you so much for your time and for sharing some amazing stories here. Now, before we sign off, I have one last question for you. For our audience out there, our missionaries get a modest monthly stipend to spend on whatever that they want, since their food and housing are all taken care of during their mission year. I want to know, Brad, what is the most ridiculous thing that you ever spent with your stipend?
I saved my stipend for like 3 months or something. Like, I did nothing. We were cutting our own hair. We were doing like whatever we could do to save money. And we saved and we saved and we saved. And then James Leapoth and I went out and bought a bass guitar in, I think, Nova Scotia at some pawn shop. And so I still have the guitar. I am not musical. I cannot. Actually, here's a good trick for the non-musical people on net. People get into things and want to clap their hands and stuff, right? And I can't do that. Even I can't. So I just pretend to slap my leg, and then people don't know when you screw up, and you still look like you're participating. So I have a bass guitar that's probably been played, I don't know, 30 times, all of them on the road, that sits in my in our den at home. And we were living pretty modestly to be able to save up for that.
For this bass guitar.
This used bass guitar. But that's probably the craziest thing I bought with stipend.
Well, maybe you'll play it a little bit tonight here after talking about it. Now, thank you so much again, Brad. That's all the time that we have for today. Again, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for your year of service with NET. I'm John Lim, and this is Brad, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
God bless everybody. See ya.